which is it's a long time between being 12 and being married. So, you know, the question of physicality and your own body and your energies and where you put those energies and how you deal with them, your thought processes and where you go with your thought process, fantasies, all of those things are very real things that you have to deal with when you're single. When you're married, you know, you can look at your wife and say, honey, let's make some time tonight, you know, let's put the kids to bed early, or let's get a babysitter. That's not an option you have, you know, so easily when you're younger. So that's why I'm asking the question, because it's a practical thing that you have to deal with.
To me, it's not just about, well, okay, we're Sikhs and we should have a married life. It's also about discipline. It's also about, you know, controlling those energies and moving them to other places, because I've found that sometimes some of the most creative ideas and the most exciting things came out of that, you know, using that creative energy, that sexual energy. There's different ways that we relate to it to create something amazing. And I think it's important that we learn that, well, it's not just about, well, you know, because we're not getting married for a long time, so we're supposed to have sex, so we should have sex, but that, you know, it's a challenge in itself to, like, okay, this isn't happening, so I'm not going to be rigid about, but, you know, I still have to deal with the fact of the matter of what my situation is, and do it in a way that is in line with our lifestyle and our beliefs, so that, you know, it's natural and it flows.
Mozart died when he was 34. Started writing music when he was 5. So he had a lifetime of creativity between the age of 5 and 34. And what I hear Gurmustic saying is that sexual energy is creative energy. Mm-hmm. And at all the times of your life, whether you're single or married, whether you have kids or don't have kids, the question of where do I put my juiciness, right? Where am I going to put my juice? That's a question, and I mean that for both men and women, right? But by juiciness, I mean that sexual, creative, playful, fun, flowing energy that just wants to be, that wants to come out, right? It's an inner, natural thing. You talked about it, Hadijot. It's part of life. So what you do, if you say sex and creativity are the two aspects of the same energy, where you put that energy in your life. Now, some people put it completely into physicality and say, man, I got to play soccer every day, you know, or I got to get out there and, you know, get exhausted and do stuff physically, you know, so I don't feel horny all the time. Or somebody else may say, man, I got to sit down at the piano and write music. You know, Mozart would sit down and write symphonies and sonatas in his head. Gurmustic talks about using his energy to create new ideas, you know, for SikhNet. So everybody has this dilemma at each stage of life. But it's particularly acute when your fire, when your heat is hot, and when you're young. So the question of how you deal with your own creative energy and where you put that creative energy comes into the questions of relationships, your own physical experience, your own creative experience in your life. So we're really exploring that area in a very deep way in this conversation. Not that I intended to at the beginning of this, but it's what's come out in our discussion.
My response to that is not necessarily my experience, but I see the ideal is if somebody is at the peak of their heat stage there, they will hopefully be in a situation that's inspiring them to use that and put it in a way that will, like creative projects, something that's not, you know, obviously something that's not exclusively sexual. But at the same time, there's a lot of repression because all the adults know that all the kids want to have sex, and all the kids do want to have sex, and all adults are always trying to get the kids not to because you have to wait for marriage, and there's this underlying wisdom behind that. The underlying wisdom is that you can't get your whole life thinking that your creative energy is just for sex, and you eventually do have to use it for something. I mean, you always should be using it for something more productive, and so, but it's created a lot of repression, and that's created a lot of problems in our society. I think rape is a direct result of these kinds of repression. Sexual dysfunctions are rampant. Oversexed, undersexed, no sex. I mean, like it's just our society is so drenched in these problems, and I think a lot of it comes from repression. So I think, on one hand, yes, creative projects, channel it, do other things with it. At the same time, sympathize and understand, and give the kids a little space. I mean, I think that what should be given to people in that stage is, first of all, give a good description. You know, like, you want to get married, and give them the reality check, and give them this thing. Put your seed in something that's gonna give a fruit, and it's gonna plant a tree that you can eat from later. Put your seed into that now. Now is the time. At the same time, nobody ever told kids how to get in relationships. They always say, "Oh, wait for marriage. Don't mess up like that. Don't mess up like that." Nobody ever said, "This is what a beautiful relationship looks like." Nobody ever said, "This is how to make this wonderful relationship. These are the nuts and bolts of how it's going to run." So I say, give a restriction, but for every restriction, there should be 2 blessings.
Give an example.
Of a blessing?
Yeah, of a restriction and its concrete 2 blessings.
Okay.
You didn't know you were going to class?
Okay, teenage daughter. She's 17 years old. You say, that guy you're flirting with and you want to get a relationship, it's not going to work out. You're going to be hurt. Please don't do that. You're free to do that. But please don't. You're going to get hurt. What I would offer to you is that you want to be in a respectful situation. You want to be with somebody who's going to respect you. When you give your sexuality and when you share sexuality with somebody, you want it to be sacred, because you're going to remember that first experience for the rest of your life. You're going to remember that's going to form you as a sexual identity, as a person. Make it respectful, make it beautiful, make it romantic, make it wonderful. There's a nice guy there's a nice guy on the other block. Not that mean guy you're going, the nice guy. I don't know.